Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening. I'm Jean Service. I'm one of the event planners at the UNC General Alumni Association. I am joined tonight with my colleague Anna Brooks Wichard and Norman Block, our three-time UNC graduate. He is celebrating his fourth decade at teaching real estate at UNC. He's an adjunct professor in the business school. Norman led our Basics of Home Buying course last month, and tonight we're going to go a little deeper and we're going to talk about how properties can be investments for you. So Norman, if you'll please get started. Thank you so much to our GAA members who are joining us tonight, because your dues make events like this possible. Please also, if you're on social media, tag us, hashtag UNC alumni and at UNCGAA.
Thanks, Jean. Let's get started. I'm really happy to be with you, and I look forward to this time. I think probably the best way to go is to hold questions till the end. We will have some time to take questions and allow us to do that. Okay. Let's talk about some famous people and what they've had to say on this subject. You probably would recognize some of these folks. This happens to be Andrew Carnegie. He said that 90% of all millionaires become so through owning real estate. More money's been made in real estate than all industrial investments combined. This gentleman is a retailer. His name is Marshall Field, and he said every person who invests in well-selected real estate in a growing section of a prosperous community adopts the surest and safest method of becoming independent. For real estate is the basis of all wealth. This is a president of the United States. Mr. Roosevelt said buying real estate is not only the best way, the quickest way, and the safest way, but it's the only way to become wealthy. And one thing that I say over and over is that I really do believe that God invented the real estate business so that ordinary people could become wealthy. And we don't have to go to history or famous people outside of our community to see the truth of this. For the last more than a decade, the wealthiest person in North Carolina has been someone living not very far from Chapel Hill. And that's Dr. Jim Goodnight, who owns SAS. If you know anything about SAS, they're a technology company. He makes his money in the computer business. What a lot of people don't know, he's also the largest real estate developer in the state and backs a lot of other real estate developers. So there are lots of folks that make money and then put it to work in the real estate game, and we should be doing that as well. As we begin to think and talk about real estate, whether it's residential or investment, there are all these big words that can be intimidating: amortization, capitalization, depreciation, acquisition basis, CapEx. And when I first started investigating real estate, those big technical terms were intimidating to me. One of the things that was posted in the section for before this class is a sheet of paper that's labeled Key Concepts Defined. And it has a lot of these buzzwords and definitions on it. But I would suggest that while we talk tonight, that maybe you keep that nearby and flip it over on the back and jot down some other things, your own definitions, because once you understand what the words mean, the concepts are really not that difficult. We'll work real hard to simplify and to explain some of the buzzwords as we go through the basic concepts. But before we start drilling down just on real estate, let's talk a little bit about getting wealthy, how people create net worth. And I want to start by asking you to think about financial statements. Most of you know that businesses provide two types of documents if it's a public company. One's called an income statement, and the other's called a balance sheet. In its simplest sense, an income statement is a list of revenue, what comes in, less the outflow or expenses, what goes out. When those two numbers are summed together, if it's a positive number, we call it a profit. And if it's a negative number, we call it a loss. So sometimes that document is also called a P&L statement. An income statement or a P&L statement, the same thing. It's about the flow of funds over time. You could see an income statement for a month. You could see an income statement for a year. Now, balance sheet's a little different. In its simplest sense, a balance sheet is a listing of your assets, what you own, less your liabilities, which is what you owe. And when those two numbers are summed together, we get what's called net worth. And in our society, that's how we measure wealth, is by looking at someone's net worth. The balance sheet is different from an income statement because it's a snapshot of some given time. You would have a balance sheet as of August 31st or December 31st or June 30th. It's at one point in time, these are your assets, less your liabilities. This is your net worth. An income statement is different. It's a flow of funds across some period of time, what came in, what went out. Now, most people are used to thinking about income statements and balance sheets when they think about companies. And companies have a goal of growing their wealth, growing their net worth, as we should also. And I want to make sure we understand that there are two different ways to grow your net worth. And having a picture of this balance sheet in front of us will help us see that it makes sense. If you increase your assets, what you own, obviously that makes your net worth bigger. That grows your net worth. That's intuitive. What's not so intuitive is that if you lower or reduce your liabilities, that also grows net worth. If one of you tomorrow inherited $100,000 and said, I'm going to go and buy real estate with this $100,000, you would be increasing your assets and therefore growing your net worth by $100,000. But if the person next to you said, well, I just inherited $100,000 too, but I'm going to take a different strategy. I'm going to go and pay off $100,000 in debt. That person has also increased their net worth. So we need to know both and understand that both are ways to create wealth. Now, it's not just corporations that have balance sheets and income statements. Individuals and families also have financial statements. They just usually don't put them down on paper and review them. But you have that, you could create a balance sheet. Here's what I own. Here's what I owe. Therefore, my net worth is X. Or here's my income for the last year. Here's my expenses. I've had a profit of X, Y, Z. These same concepts that we talk about in business with corporations and big companies also apply to individuals. And I bring all that up because I want to draw a distinction for you between the income statement side of life and the balance sheet side of life. You'll see in just a minute what I mean by that, but they're two different parts of life, the income statement side and the balance sheet side. Let me illustrate by telling you about my students. I have my students tell me, what their plan is. Why are they in SCHOOL? And they say, well, I'm in SCHOOL to get a DEGREE so I can get a JOB, so I can make some MONEY, so I can buy some STUFF. All of that's on the income statement side of life. All of that kind of thinking has to do with income and outflows. Most of us focus most of our attention to the balance sheet side of life. How can I increase my earnings? I want to be able to acquire other things. Now, most people do get that JOB and start making some MONEY. And here's how the American free enterprise system works for the majority of Americans. I'm sure it's not anyone on this webinar tonight, it's other people. But there are many, many, many folks who go and start making that MONEY. And then being great Americans, they go out and spend about 110, 115% of what they make. And they start running up some DEBT. And if you do that long enough, you can become another millionaire of a different kind, which we don't really want to be. The way the system's supposed to work is that we make some MONEY, and most of you guys are probably too young to remember, but there used to be an old concept around that said you're supposed to live within your means and spend less than what you make and actually have some money left over at the end of the month, the end of the quarter, the end of the year. There's this old antiquated tool. Again, you probably haven't heard of it. It's called a budget that helps people do that by assigning a purpose for every dollar. But the way our system is supposed to work is that we do spend less than what we make so that we have some excess capital at the end of the period. And what we do with that is begin to acquire earning assets. You have to force yourself to live within your means if you're going to have any excess capital to begin building your balance sheet. It's hard to do in today's world with all the advertising we're bombarded with all the time. It's very easy to overspend. It's very easy to spend on a whim. It's hard to live by a budget, but I can tell you that the plan should be that we begin to grow our assets, we begin to reduce our liabilities, our net worth gets bigger, we nurture the balance sheet side of life over time, and one day we have enough cash flow from our balance sheet to start replacing the earned income on the income side of life. I can assure you that the only pathway to retirement or financial freedom is through your balance sheet. I want to say that again. The only pathway to financial freedom, retirement, independence is through your balance sheet. I don't care if you're a brain surgeon making $2 million a year, when you get to a point where you either don't want to or can't do what you do with your brain and your mouth and your hands, all of the cash flow on the income statement side of life stops. And unless you have built your balance sheet, built your net worth to produce cash flow from your balance sheet, there's not going to be anything to support your lifestyle. There's a book that if you haven't read, you ought to pick up. It's old, but it's great. It's still very popular. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by an author by the name of Kiyosaki. And he makes the definition of financial freedom or financial independence in a way that I like. He says, if you have enough income from your balance sheet to support your lifestyle such that you don't have to have any earned income from work, then you're considered unlimited wealthy. If the cash flow from your balance sheet can support your lifestyle, you don't have to have any money from work to enjoy the lifestyle you've created, then you've achieved financial freedom. You're financially independent. A lot of good things in that little book. If you haven't read it, I'd suggest that you pick it up. Most people don't understand that to become wealthy, you have to focus on both your income statement and your balance sheet. Let me tell you what my story looks like. You know, I was lucky to be at Carolina and get a good education and had some training in law and business. And when I got out of school, my number one goal was I wanted to grow my income. Man, I was motivated to do that. I became a workaholic, and everything about me was, how can I grow my business? How can I grow my income? And I did pretty well for the first few years, but during that time, I didn't do anything about acquiring assets. I didn't even know you're supposed to. I hadn't had this class. I hadn't read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so while I did a good job on the income statement side of life, I really did a miserable job on the balance sheet side of life. I really wasn't doing much to create my net worth. So I had done some self-education. I read about that and said, boy, I've really messed up. I've got to focus on the balance sheet side of life. And for the next several years, I really focused on building net worth. I started building some duplexes and having some rental property and making investments in local businesses. But I didn't put any attention on driving my income. And after about 10 years or 12 years out, I really came to the understanding that you got to do both. If you're going to become financially independent, you have to focus on both the income statement and the balance sheet side of life, and the process cannot wait. You must start early on. And it's really important that you do so because habits form early in life. I guess the key point is you just can't wait to start focusing on the balance sheet side of life. It takes time for assets to grow. It takes time for debt to be reduced. It takes time for net worth to grow. And we'll see in a few minutes the difference between an early saver and a late saver. Some of this, for some of you, may be a conversation you need to have with your children, but it's never too late to get started whenever. My experience has been that a person either develops a pattern of being a spender or the pattern of being a saver. And once that pattern is set, it's really hard to change. And for the first 5 or 6 years when I was out of law school and MBA school, I was clearly a spender. And now looking back, I can see that it didn't make any difference if I made more money. I just spent more money. And yet my daughter married a guy that was a saver from day one when I met him, and he talked about their relationship being serious. We started talking a little bit about financial things, and he said, Mr. Block, I've saved 50 cents on every dollar that I've ever earned in my life. And kudos for that. So the starting place is living within our means and being a saver. I'm older than most of you guys, so I guess I can preach a little bit. I would tell you the secret to happiness in life is getting to the point where you learn to be content with what you have, living within your means and being satisfied and happy with it. And that's really hard to do in a society that's always saying you need more, you must have more, you got to have this. But living within our means and having this attitude of a saver is how you'll become wealthy. Does it really matter when you start savings? Well, let's do a little experiment and see. I want to tell you a story about Chris and Pat. Chris starts saving at age 21. He's our early saver, but he only saves $1,000 a year. That's pretty modest. That's less than $100 a month. And Chris stops saving when he's 35. Wow, he didn't save for very long, and he only saved $1,000 a year. Now, Pat, on the other hand, didn't start saving until age 35, saved the same amount every year, $1,000 a year, but did it until Pat was 64, twice as long, 30 years. So as you look at these two patterns of savings, wouldn't you assume that Pat is going to be the one that's going to be better off at retirement? Pat paid $1,000 a year for twice as long than Chris did. Well, if they were able to earn an 8% rate of interest, which you can do in a good stock market situation, mutual fund portfolio, certainly can do in real estate. Where's Chris at age 65? And where's Pat at age 65? Want to make a guess? Pat has accumulated $122,346. And remember, Pat paid in to his savings twice as long as Chris did. Well, where's old Chris? Chris has $273,222. 2.2 times as much, simply because he started earlier. Over time, compound interest and appreciation in value are going to become your best friends. And it's important that we put together these financial concepts as we start thinking about real estate, because real estate can help you begin this plan toward financial independence. There are too many people that say, well, start saving for the future, for retirement. I hear this from my MBAs and my undergraduates. Build my assets, live within my means. Are you crazy? Stick to a budget? Oh, I'll do that when I get caught up some. Or I'll do that in my 30s, or I'll do that when I get a promotion, or I'll do that when the kids are grown. It always gets put off. But that's not what needs to happen. Now, if you agree with me that we need to focus on building our balance sheet and building our net worth if we're to get to financial independence, let's think about where would I invest in order to earn a decent return? Well, there are lots of types of assets we could invest in. One is financial instruments. A lot of people put some of their money into financial instruments like CDs or savings accounts. They're not paying very much right now, but the characteristic of those financial investments is they pay monthly interest or dividends on a regular basis. So you sort of have an operating cash flow coming in every month. It's dependable, it's safe, even though the return might be small. I just pulled the other day, getting ready for our course, what CD rates are looking like right now, and they're miserable, as you can see. And you're going to get this slide deck if you want to come back and look at some of this. But, you know, 3-year CDs, some of them are even less than 1%, but that's going to improve over the years. It's been better in the past. The thing about a financial type of investment is it has that periodic cash flow, operating cash flow. It's safe and it's dependable. But where else might we consider putting money? Well, I have a friend that's very knowledgeable about art, and she has done a great job of identifying emerging artists or identifying opportunities to purchase collectibles at a very good price. And the return that she earns from her portfolio is different. In the financial world, it's that periodic operating cash flow. Her return is from appreciation in value over time. And it's interesting to see over time that actually top art investment has way outpaced the S&P and almost any measure of stock market performance that you want to choose. The last year that I saw final numbers for was 2018. Blue chip artwork appreciated in value 10.6% during a time when the S&P 500 actually fell. So that's something to think about, but it requires some knowledge to be able to do that. And art is not the only collectible that's out there. There are people that collect coins. There are people that collect artifacts. It's the point is putting it into an asset that's going to appreciate in value over time. And if we had time, we could list many classes of investments and assets. I mean, some people invest in commodities. They're day traders. That requires specific knowledge. It requires constant time and attention. And the risk of ruin is really high. You could lose all your money buying futures or investing in commodities, but the return can be higher. In fact, in general, the higher returns do carry more risk. We always want to see how much we can hedge that risk return scale. I actually had a professor one time in business school. I asked him, I said, surely there's some way to beat this risk return curve. How do you ever earn a return that's better than the commensurate risk that you take? And his answer is one I'll never forget. He said, through superior knowledge. Superior knowledge can allow you to earn a return that carries less risk than would be commensurate in a normal situation in the world. Well, you know, what I want to find and what I want to find for you is a class of assets. Let's put our thinking caps on. You know, I like that return from operations, that periodic cash flow that's dependable, even if it's not huge. I like that feature of money coming every month, getting a dividend or interest. I like that return from operations, that income stream. I wonder if there's a class of assets that has that also, like collectibles, has that appreciation in value that happens over time. I like that because one of the things about appreciation and value over time is it's not intermittently taxed. I get a gain or return every year from my collectibles when it goes up in value, but it's not taxed intermittently. That cash flow from operations is current income every year and gets taxed every year. You know, golly gee, the perfect investment, if I could just find one or think of it, would be if it had a return from operations, a return from appreciation, and at the same time, it would reduce any debt that was associated with that asset all by itself. Oh yeah, there is such a class of assets. It's called real estate. Let me show you what I'm talking about. There's a line there, and your eyes are not deceiving you. It goes up a little bit, and that's the expense line. Every month that I operate my rental house, I have some expenses, but I also have some income. That second line, and again, your eyes are not deceiving you, that's going up at a little steeper rate. That's the income line. So every month I have rent coming in and expenses going out, and I have some cash flow left over, because one of my cardinal rules is I'm never going to buy a property that can't carry itself. I want my real estate assets to flow cash. If I borrow and leverage that investment pretty high, it doesn't have to be a huge cash flow in the beginning. But what I can tell you is if it'll be positive in the beginning, it's going to grow over time because rents are going to grow faster than operating expenses. Well, that's sort of that operating revenue. But real estate has another kind of return, and that's the return from appreciation and value. If I had bought a home 10 years ago in Chapel Hill or Cary or North Raleigh, a $200,000 townhome even, it would be well over $300,000 today. Well, that growth from, in our example, 200,000 to 300,000, that's grown my net worth by $100,000, increasing the value of my assets. But at the same time, I have the return from operations, the return from appreciation. I also am paying down the debt. Every month I have to make a payment to the bank, and that reduces the principal that's outstanding. In fact, over 15 years, a $160,000 loan would be paid down by about $50,000. Well, that reduction in debt to the tune of $50,000 also increases my net worth. The good thing about it is that it's not all taxed as ordinary income. Now, that operating cash flow, that comes every month, so it's current income, so it gets taxed as ordinary income, but the appreciation and value is not intermittently taxed. And when it's taxed eventually, it's taxed at a more favorable tax rate, at the long-term capital gains rate. And that debt reduction is not a taxable event at all. So we're looking at something with three types of return, a three-pronged return. That's why some of the most famous people have had things to say like this. Real estate's the best investment for small savings. More money's made from the rise in real estate values than from all other causes combined. To speculate in stocks is too risky and even dangerous. But when you buy real estate, you're buying an inheritance. Wow. Calvin Coolidge said, the ownership of a home, the feeling of independence that comes with the possession of a bit of the earth, are among the most powerful incentives to high civic interest and usefulness. That's one of the things I like about investing in real estate is it's tangible. I can see it. I can put my hands on it. I can walk through it. Owning stocks can be a good thing, but It's not tangible like that. It's not the same to me. I don't understand even why stock markets go up and down sometimes when they do. Franklin Roosevelt said, real estate purchased with the common sense, paid for in full, and managed with reasonable care is about the safest kind of investment in the world. A lot of food for thought here. I'm excited about real estate because it's a unique balance sheet builder. And let me explain. It all starts with leverage. Let's say we talk to the average Joe on the street and talk about an example where they were to buy a home for $200,000 and over the next 3 years, it goes up 10%. The average person might say, well, that's not too bad. I saw 10% appreciation. I got a 10% return. That's not too bad. Well, that's totally wrong. If you buy a $200,000 property with 80% financing, you only put down 20%. You only have $40,000 of your own money in the deal. If that $200,000 home goes up 10%, that's a $20,000 gain on an investment of $40,000. That's a 50% return. That's the power of leverage. That's part of what makes real estate so unique. Because of the nature of real estate, banks love to loan on real estate, and they're willing to loan a high percentage of the purchase price. There's almost no other class of assets that you could take to a lender and have them loan you 80% of value. When you use conventional financing, 80-20 is a standard rule, but let's use that example. You put in 20% of the purchase price and the bank puts in 80% of the purchase price. Well, when it goes up in value, you don't just get 20% of the increase in value, you get 100% of the increase in value. And when the debt is reduced, by the way, with other people's money, the tenant's money, you don't just get 20% of that benefit, you get 100%. That's the power of leverage. That's what 4-to-1 leverage is. Every dollar you have in the deal, the bank has $4, and yet you get all of the appreciation and value, all the benefit of the debt reduction, and all of the cash flow. They only get interest on their loan. I just love this three-dimensional return: the return from operations, the return from appreciation, and the return from debt reduction. Real estate is a unique class of assets. Now, let me dig a little bit deeper on something that I think you should be aware of. There's a rule in finance that's called the Rule of 72. Some of you probably know about this. I didn't know about it for a long time. But if you take the number 72 and divide it by the rate of growth, the interest rate, the return, the rate of growth, that math will give you the number of years it takes to double in value. Let me say that again. If you take the number 72, and let's say it's a 6% interest rate, divide by 6%, it'll tell you how many years it takes for money to double. So you can see if we earn a low return like 4%, it's going to take 18 years for it to double in value. But if we could earn 10% on our money, it doubles every 7.3 years. And if we could get into a situation where we could earn 15% on our money, it would double every 4.6 years. And this is critical. You're not going to get wealthy on the left-hand side of this chart with lazy money. It may be safe, but it's not going to make you wealthy. You're going to have to be willing to look for assets you can invest in where you can get that rate of return up so that the doubling or the turn of your money comes more often. In the reverse, you know, the math is the same. You can divide 72 by how many years you want your money to double in value. Like if I needed a certain amount of money when my child's going to start college, I could divide 72 by the number of years I've got, and it would tell you what rate I've got to have to earn to make that happen. Actually, the real number is 72.73, if there are any math majors in the group, but it's called the rule of 72. Now, let me show you where this comes into play with wealth creation. Let's be conservative and assume an 8% annual return. That's not lazy money, but that's not money with a lot of vim and vigor either. What they say in the trade is the high returns of things that have juice. This is in the middle, but it means that money would double every 9 years. So if your children or a college student or anyone would start investing at age 22, I guess that would be Chris, our early saver, and put $10,000 to work one time, just talking about one payment of $10,000, 9 years later, when that person's 31, it would be worth $20,000. When they're 40, it would be worth $40,000. At age 49, it would have doubled again at $80,000. At 58, it'd be $160,000. And at 67, it'd be $320,000. Now, most people live and work into their late 60s or early 70s, and investors continue to invest. This person, if they started with $10,000 at age 22 and earned an annual rate of return of 8%, they'd have $640,000 at age 76. Well, for a lot of us, we're not 22. So what happens if you start later? Let's say you start at 40, put the same amount of money to work one time, $10,000. Well, in 9 years, it's going to double. And in 9 years, it's going to double again. And in 9 years, it's going to double again. And when we're 76, we're going to have $160,000. My point is, you never get to make up those lost years by being a late starter to the savings game. Look at the difference, folks. By missing out on these last two doublings, which is where the real wealth is created, there's a difference of almost $1 million. And that's just because this person started early enough to get two more doublings than the person that started at 40. What if we were talking about $10,000 every year instead of $10,000 one time? It would be millions of dollars of difference. And this is what wealthy people know. This is what generational wealth is all about. Passing wealth through a family over generations of people who understand financial management, understand wealth creation, understand nurturing and growing net worth. We need to get in on that. We need to do that ourselves. Well, let's talk about the opportunity presented by the current economy in real estate. I would submit to you that even though we're in a crazy market, and we've seen a lot of increase in value in the last 2 years, the window of opportunity is still open to acquire real estate. What are the factors? Well, we're still at record low interest rates. When I started in the real estate business 42 years ago, mortgages were 6%. In 1971, mortgages were 16 3/4. Today, owner-occupied mortgages are still less than 3%, and investment loans are in the 4s. So we have amazingly low interest rates. We have a huge high demand for rentals, especially here in the Triangle area or in cities that are like the Triangle area, be it Charlotte, be it Nashville, be it Richmond, be it Atlanta. Those are the markets I'm more familiar with. Just can't keep enough properties for quality renters. And I wrote an article on where rental demand comes from here in the Triangle, and that's one of the things that you'll get as extra material. I think it might be interesting to read where that demand comes from. There are about 5 or 6 factors that come into play. I know it's hard for you to hear it, but here in North Carolina, we still have relatively attractive prices. We look at each other and say, man, real estate's expensive, but not on a national scale. If you look outside, from outside in at North Carolina, we're considered a value market. People coming from the Northeast, people coming from California, people coming from even the Midwest, they think our prices are great. In fact, that's some of who's bidding the prices up. People that are fleeing California coming to North Carolina to get away from the fires, and they don't want their kids to grow up in school in California. They come here and they think our prices are a bargain, that they could pay way more than that. So we have record low interest rates, high demand for rentals, relatively attractive prices, and then where we are in the real estate cycle. You know, we took a pretty good hit in 2008 to 2012. I also put an article out for you tonight that'll be available after this session on why you don't need to be worried about our current real estate bubble busting. It's not going to be the same thing that happened in 2008 and 2009. And I explain why. It's a fundamentally different situation. Yes, we're in a hot market, but it's driven by solid economic consequences of demand and low supply. Where we are in the real estate cycle is important, and the projections from every economic service I've looked at for the next several years is that we're going to continue to see positive growth, and real estate's going to be a darling. And then if you're local, and I realize we've got people from all over on this webinar, but if you are local, or if you chose to invest here near UNC, the Research Triangle of North Carolina is a pretty tremendous draw. You've probably seen all the announcements about Google and Apple coming, but there are many big companies besides that, in biotech, technology, the 3 universities. There's lots of reasons, but the Triangle is as good a place as you could invest in real estate in the world today. And then we're dealing with an asset that's a great balance sheet builder. When you factor all that together, I will tell you that the window for opportunity for acquisition is wide open. It's harder to find a good buy today than it was a few years ago because there's more competition. That's going to balance itself out. You're going to see, as we get later into the fall and into the beginning of next year, more available, a little less demand. It's still going to be a hot market, but you can find properties, especially if you have the right person trying to help you, that can identify things that are coming on the market and you're in a position to act quickly. We talked about that some in our seminar on single family homes, about how to be ready to act quickly. So we want to buy it right. Purchase price matters. We're not going to overpay if we can afford not to. We certainly are not going to buy anything that won't carry itself, cash flow. Then we want to rent it right. We want to make sure that we purchase the right kind of property in the right place to be able to get those top rents. We want to operate it right. And that involves preserving your asset. It's funny being in real estate. People act so surprised when they have to spend money on their houses or their rental property. And yet everybody knows you have to maintain a car or it won't run. Well, it's the same thing with real estate. You have to maintain it. You have to put some money back into it. And that needs to be a part of your financial plan. So operate it right, and then eventually sell it right, or maybe not sell it, but maybe use a tax-free exchange to trade it right to minimize taxes. So there are 4 little keys for you. We're going to give you some other hints and tips as we go along. When we talk about buying it right, there's 2 major strategies that investment counselors talk about. One is a low-end strategy, and another is a quality property strategy. There's a great book posted up here in the corner by Gary Keller. Gary's probably the smartest person I've ever met or worked with. He's written several books. One of them is The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. I would recommend it for everybody. And he talks about with the low end strategy, what you want to do is buy properties at a great price, even if they need some fix up. And the emphasis in that strategy is owning properties that are going to cash flow. There's more focus on that operating cash flow with those properties, and there's more focus on building value in the assets by fixing them up. But it's still, you buy them and hold those properties. We're not talking about flipping houses. The strategy that I'm more familiar with and that I think is better is this average cost strategy, where we're not looking for distressed properties that we can get a super great deal on. We're just looking for a quality property at a good deal. Where we do want to stay away from, though, is high-end properties. And I can tell you that because rents go up in conjunction with price in my market to about $400,000. And above that, rents don't go up as fast as price. I actually talked to an investor today. It's funny, it happened today, out of buying a $600,000 rental property. They were in love with the community, love with the house, but that's just too much to pay for a rental property. They'll never get enough rent to justify that investment. So if we focus on the appreciation focused strategy, we're going to buy those higher end properties. I provided a sheet for you. I don't know if you downloaded it. We'll go over it in a minute about 3 different types of construction. I'm talking about just family homes. More gain in this strategy is going to come from appreciation than from cash flow. We want to buy in markets that have dynamic growth, like the Triangle or Charlotte. And we're going to focus mostly on the internal rate of return when we run our pro forma. As I mentioned earlier, the cash flow strategy, that cash flow focused strategy, is more low end, more emphasis on getting the properties paid for quickly, maybe paying cash for the properties. And you're typically looking for a very long hold in that strategy. That cash flow focused strategy also has more of its gain coming from the operating cash flow than in the other strategy. We're going to focus on the appreciation strategy, the appreciation focused strategy, buying quality properties and holding them over time. I think for most of us on this call tonight, we have day jobs and we don't have a lot of time to be putting sweat equity into houses that we fix up ourselves. And we don't want to manage low-end properties because of the problems that come up more often with leasing, and we'll go without saying negatives. The ease of leveraging quality properties makes us look for those better properties. Lenders are very willing to loan on good quality properties in good neighborhoods. The markets that most of us live in, where I know where a lot of you come from, are stronger markets. And it's hard to work that low-end strategy. It's hard to find any deals to buy. Well, what makes a good rental property? Let's talk about that for a minute. If I were coaching you, I would say you want to buy it in a market that you know, because all real estate's local. I know a lot about the Triangle. I know a little bit about Charlotte and Richmond. I don't know a whole lot about much else, but everything in real estate's local. You know, the old hack, location, location, location. Well, state law controls real estate, so things could be different in Georgia than they are in North Carolina. They're mostly similarities, but there can be some differences. So I would suggest you buy in a market that you know. You certainly want to look to a market where home values are appreciating. Here in the Triangle, I just saw a statistic that said on average, homes went up over 12% in the last year here in the Triangle. I'm trying to buy in a way that I can generate that positive cash flow. The more, the better. I'm looking for a good interest rate. So I'm going to shop lenders. I'm not just going to go to the bank where I bank. I'll talk to them, but I'm going to talk to 2 or 3 others. I want something that's easy to rent at a good rental amount. So I'm probably going to want to talk to a property manager that works in that market and get them involved in helping decide what to buy, where to buy. I want good construction. I don't want to have to come back in 3 years from now and have a major injection of capital expenditures for capital improvements. And my prejudice is going to guide me to relatively newer properties because you won't have big surprises. You buy a house where the roof is 20 years old and the air conditioners are 14 years old, you can just pretty much bet you're going to spend $20,000 in the next few years on those items. So either relatively new or something that's already been renovated. Now, I'd have no qualms about buying a 28-year-old home that had a new roof, a new HVAC system, kitchen had been remodeled, the floors had been redone. You know, that would be probably in a better location than I could find with new construction. All right. I guess next general comment would be to buy with the tenant in mind. So what do tenants want? In my experience, there are 3 types of renters, at least in markets like the Triangle, and they're looking for properties of 3 different types. This first type of property is what I would call your typical single family home. It's going to be a home that has 4 bedrooms at least, not 3. You want to have 4 bedrooms because a 4-bedroom home will rent for more than a 3-bedroom home. But in today's world, every family is going to make 1 bedroom into an office. I think you need a minimum of at least 2,000 square feet. Got to have a 2-car garage. Got to be in a community with some nice amenities. People that rent these work mostly for big corporations or universities. They're going to have some teenage kids, so high school is important. Monthly rent on this type of property in our market is anywhere from $2,000 to $3,400 a month. And there are tons of people walking around with housing allowances from their corporations in and above those amounts. The second type of property is what I would call your smaller single family home. And this is going to be rented more to younger families, like new to mid management. This might be a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath home, although if you could find it with a extra room or a 4th bedroom that could be an office, or maybe a loft that could double as an office, that would be desirable. The size house I'm talking about is like 1,600 to 1,800 square feet. And these are general ranges. This is not in cement. But the monthly rent on these smaller houses goes from $1,200 to $1,800 a month. They're typically families that are going to have younger kids, so they're going to care about elementary school, maybe preschool. I probably would not buy one of these smaller homes with the master bedroom down because I'm not going to sleep on the first floor and have a 1 or 2-year-old upstairs. That's not going to work. And then the third type of property that we have a lot of demand for is the nice townhomes. And I'm not talking about the little teeny tiny ones. I'm talking about something with 1,000 to 1,500 square feet, 2 or 3 bedrooms. If it has a garage, that's a huge plus. There are a lot of professionals and single people that want that lifestyle. They're not looking for a yard. They're not looking to maintain a garden. They want amenities, but they want a great location, and they want to be able to go to the beach or the mountains on the weekend and know that everything's being looked after. Where in the single family home situation, that's a different world. They probably do want a yard. In fact, they want a fenced yard. They want a flat yard because they're going to have kids that play, or they want to have a pet. And there's some more detail on all of this available in the material that I've given you outside of the slides. So take a look at that when you have a chance. Talking some more about what renters want, they're not very different than you and I. They want a planned neighborhood with good amenities. They want a pool. They want a clubhouse. They want a tot lot. They would love to have pickleball courts. So if you're looking at properties, and you found 3 or 4 that you're considering, amenities make a big difference. The feel of the neighborhood makes a big difference. Home Builders has done a study many times asking thousands of people, would you rather have a great home in an average neighborhood or an average home in a great neighborhood? And overwhelmingly, people say they'd rather have an average home in a great neighborhood. People buy lifestyle. Well, tenants are no different. Good schools, really important. Perceived safety, really important. Bikeability, really important. Being near jobs, transportation, shopping, entertainment, all that matters. They want the same things you want. They want nice features, kitchens with granite countertops. Everybody thinks they need a fireplace. They really don't, but they think it's funny. I think all guys think they're going to move in and put a sofa in front of the fireplace and sit there with their arm around their loved one. Never happens. Garages are great. Flat yard, really important. Fenced is best. This might be a little checklist for you to work from, okay? Whether you're buying for yourself or for a rental property, I want to give you a few tips about buying from a builder, because I think in the next 12 months, a lot of the inventory is going to be new construction. And that's fine. I love new construction. I have a prejudice towards new construction. I've kept records for almost 40 years, and I believe that new construction appreciates in value even faster than resale homes do. What you got to know is a builder isn't going to be willing to negotiate on price. Not very often. The reason is they're building in the same neighborhood. They need their sales to be recorded at full price, because that's going to be the comp for the very next sale that comes along that has to have an appraisal. If they negotiate the price down on a property, then it becomes a bad comp that hurts them for the next year. And so when you negotiate with a builder, it's different than negotiating with an existing homeowner. Ask for other things that won't change the price, like maybe they'll put in extra appliances as a concession. Maybe they'll upgrade the floor coverings. Maybe they'll put in extra landscaping or fence that backyard for you, or provide blinds, which are pretty expensive. And if you're going to have a property and rent it, you don't have to have drapes, but you got to have blinds on the windows. So if I was negotiating for a rental property with a builder, I'd be asking for the refrigerator, washer dryer, fence in backyard, blinds, things like that. You'll be more successful negotiating those than negotiating price. I mentioned earlier, you might want to involve your property manager if you're going to hire one, or maybe a person that sells a lot of rental property knows about it, especially if you're going into an area where you're not familiar with. You need to know, you need to have that local knowledge about where are the hot areas, where's the demand for the rental, what are renters asking for? Secret to being a good landlord: yes, you have to be a good negotiator, but you also can't be a softie. Sometimes you have to apply tough love to your tenants. You got to make them pay on time. The last thing you want to do is let a tenant get into you for some money, because that just spirals down faster and faster. In our firm, we require rent is due on the 5th. If it's not paid by the 10th, the tenant has to bring in certified funds physically to the office. If it isn't paid by the 15th, eviction starts. No ifs, ands, or buts. You know, you have a property and in your mind, this is what you expect it to look like. And at least in Chapel Hill, this is a possibility. Animal house. Well, not really that bad. In fact, we don't have a lot of trouble with that. Usually, if there's any damage done, it's covered by the security deposit. But I'll tell you, don't assume that your tenants are taking good care of your property, or even that your property manager is taking good care of your property. One secret to real estate is put your own eyes on it at least once a year. Do a walkthrough yourself. Make sure you know the condition of that property. Some things you can consider to limit your liability. And these are little checklists. You're going to get these slides. You can keep them. always require renter's insurance. But a secret to that is you want to be named yourself as an additional named insured. And that's very commonly done. It doesn't cost the renter any extra to name you as an additional interested party. The reason is if they invite somebody over who slips and falls and cracks their head, if you're as a named insured on that renter's policy, that tenant's policy has to protect both you and the tenant and pay for the legal defense of both. So there's worth the price of admission right there. Remember to be an additional named insured on the tenant's rental policy. Over and above the insurance that you carry yourself, make sure you've got a good general liability policy. And everybody, even if you don't own any real estate, ought to have an umbrella insurance policy sitting on top of all your other insurance. A $2 million umbrella policy is only about $400 a year. And it sits on top of your car insurance, on top of your homeowners, on top of your liability for rental properties. We're in a very litigious age. It doesn't cost very much to have that extra protection. A lot of folks consider putting their properties into an LLC, a limited liability company, which is the preferred format, not so much a corporation. We can talk about that at the end if you want to talk about LLCs and how they can or cannot be a good thing. I guess I want to emphasize again that all real estate is local. And so you either have to have local knowledge yourself, or you have to have someone standing beside you, walking this path with you, helping you, who has that local knowledge. Now, we're in good shape on time. I'm just going to plow ahead and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. I want to talk about building and operating a portfolio of single-family homes on this model. We've talked about a lot of generalities. We've talked about some specifics, but I want to show you a model that has actually worked very well for quite a number of people that I know and for myself as well. I believe that in building, owning, and operating a portfolio of residential real estate, there are 4 distinct phases. There's an acquisition phase, there's a debt reduction phase, there's a cash flow phase, and there's a disposition phase. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dave Ramsey. He's a radio personality and an author of many books about wealth management and handling finances. I like Dave. He's actually one of my heroes, but I disagree with him on one thing. Dave Ramsey says you shouldn't buy any investment property until you can pay cash for it. Well, Dave doesn't live in my house. I don't think he lives in my community, because if I waited until I saved enough money to pay cash for a rental property, the property would have tripled in cost. So that doesn't work for me. Norman's strategy is to use debt to acquire the properties. And I'm going to leverage them to the maximum because I want to own multiple properties. In fact, I think the riskiest time for a real estate investor is when they only own one property. If you own 10 properties and have a vacancy, you still got the income from 9, you got 30 days, you get it re-rented. You only have one property and it's vacant, you have no cash flow. You're 100% vacant. So my strategy and what I teach and what I coach is to use debt to acquire multiple properties. In fact, I want to acquire properties as quickly as I can. And I'm going to leverage them, meaning borrow against them, use the bank's money as much as I can, up to the point where it'll just carry itself and break even. I might borrow 75% from a traditional lender and maybe another 10% from Uncle John, who's got his money sitting in a CD earning 0.9%. I can pay him 4% and make 4 times what he's earning. I can also give him some security by giving him a second deed of trust. I'm going to do whatever I need to leverage this property so that I can buy multiple properties and make my cash go a long way. But when you do that, you're not going to have big operating cash flows. And I've purposely been very conservative here of saying, let's say I've, over a period of time, put together a portfolio of 5 properties. And because I have leveraged them and maybe used some of that Uncle John second mortgage money over time, I just don't have much cash flow from the properties. I only have $2,500, $3,000 a year positive cash flow after all expenses. But think about what we're saying. We're saying the tenant's money pays everything, including paying down the mortgage, and I still have a positive cash flow after everything, including maintenance, including keeping our properties in good shape. Well, at some point, I'm going to have what I want in my portfolio. For this example, it's going to be 5 houses, or I'm going to get to a place in time where the window of opportunity for acquisition is going to close. God forbid we ever go back to a time of super high interest rates, but if that were to happen, it just isn't going to make sense to continue to add more and more properties. So for whatever reason, whether it's my choice or because of the world that we're in, there'll be a period of time where I can look and say, acquisition's over. I used all the cash I could generate during that time to buy more property, but now I'm going to change strategies. And we're going to move from the acquisition phase to the debt reduction phase. Either by choice or by force, we're going to move to debt reduction, and we're not going to acquire anymore. And I'm using an example in front of you tonight of 5 properties. The company that I own manages over 2,000. Well, that's not true. We have over 2,000 properties under lease. We manage in-house over 1,100, but we do have a lot of folks that manage their own properties. And we can talk about that at the end also. But the typical client that we have owns 3 to 4 properties. Our biggest investor only owns 19, I think is the biggest. A lot of people own 2. But I like the 4 to 5 number myself. You'll see why in a minute. So let's say we've got 5 properties and we've moved into debt reduction. Well, I'm going to borrow something from Dave Ramsey. It's something he calls the debt snowball. And what I want to do is I want to get one of these properties paid for. It's sort of like a house of cards. I don't know if when you were a kid, you built a house of cards, and then if you pull the right card out of the middle, it just collapsed in on itself. Well, that's what I want to happen with all this debt that I've put in place. I want to work it in a way that it sort of crumbles in on itself. And the secret to making that happen is to get one of these properties paid for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the property with the lowest mortgage amount, not the lowest interest rate, the lowest mortgage amount. And I'm going to take all this extra cash flow, modest as it is, and I'm going to apply that towards that one mortgage. I've got these financial guns that I'm going to aim at that one mortgage, killing off that one mortgage. And somewhere in my budget, I'm going to find $200 a month because getting this paid for is TP, top priority. So I've got all this money going as extra payments on principal to pay off this mortgage that's been in place for some time. And I'm still making a regular payment every month that's paying some principal down. But look, extra over and above the normal amortization of the mortgage, I'm paying about an extra $16,000 a year. And by this point, let's say I had paid my mortgage down to $160 when I started this program, it could be paid for in 10 years. And once it's paid for and has no debt, now I've got an asset that instead of kicking off $2,500 a year, it kicks off $25,000 a year. And I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to spin this snowball forward. I'm going to pick the property that has the next lowest mortgage amount. and I'm going to fire all these financial cannons at it. And this is maybe years down the road. Remember, it took a long time to get that first one paid for. I'm making more money, so I'm going to find $300 a month to apply towards it. And now I'm killing off extra debt to the tune of almost $42,000 a year. And I've owned this property while I was paying down the other. So it's only going to take me about 3 years to pay that one off. That gives me 2 properties paid for, and I continue this snowball, but it keeps rolling faster and faster because now I've got 2 big guns and some more little guns and my contribution from my own cash flow. I'm killing off debt on that property to the tune of $63,000, $64,000 a year. It's only going to take me a couple of years to get that one paid for. And the truth of the matter is, it isn't going to take 8 to 10 years to pay for that first one, because what I'm going to do if I have 5 properties is I'm going to study them while I'm in the acquisition phase. I'm going to learn about them, and I'm going to know which one is the least good performer, which one's not going up in value quite as much, which one's a little harder to rent, which one's harder to increase the rent on. And at some point, I'm going to sell that one property, and I'm going to take all the cash out of it and use it to pay that first one off faster. So I don't want it to take 10 years. But even if it did take 10 years and 3 years and 2 years, that's 15 years. That's not such a long time to end up with 4 properties fully paid for. And that's my wish for you guys, is that each one of you would end up with a portfolio of properties that could produce an extra $100,000 a year in cash flow over and above your 401k, over and above your Social Security. Most people work from 25, 29 to 65, 69, about 40 years of their working life. We're only talking about 15 years in here, maybe less if you use that strategy of taking one to pay off the first one. But I want you to end up, as we go into the third phase, which is the cash flow phase, where you got $100,000 a year subsidizing your other forms of income. This is just one part of your balance sheet, your real estate portfolio. Now, listen carefully to what I'm going to say next. If you're married to someone like my wife is married to, if you're married to someone like my wife is married to, you're going to need 8. And if you're married to someone like Jean's husband's married to, you're going to need 12. I'm kidding around. Obviously, how much is enough? How big is it? Well, I don't know. I know people that own 20 properties. I know people that own 2. But a nice number is 3 or 4. In fact, I had one of my best friends come to me, and he's a physician. He said, my financial advisor told me to do something, and I'm not sure I understand it. I said, well, what is that? He said, he told me to go out and buy 3 houses in the $400,000 range, only finance them up to the point that they will carry themselves, and rent them out. Why is he telling me to do that? I said, well, I can explain that. I understand it perfectly. He's saying, go put your name on $1 million worth of real estate today. Use leverage to do so. And he's telling you to do that because in the next 10 or 12 years here in the triangle, properties are going to continue to grow tremendously in value. Maybe it takes 15 years, but it's going to double in value again. And if you have your name on $1 million worth of real estate and it doubles in value, that creates $1 million worth of net worth. And during that same time, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt will be paid off by your tenants' money. He's talking about building your net worth, building your balance sheet over and above everything else you're doing. How else could you make a quick $1 million, or maybe 10 or 12, 15 years in quick, but how else can you make $1 million over and above everything else other than to put your name on $1 million worth of real estate that's going to double in value? Well, In every group, people challenge me and say, oh, it's not going to double in value. Well, I promise you, if we as a group 15 years ago had bought 4 houses in Chapel Hill, we'd be very happy today. So that's the third phase, cash flow. And then the question comes up, well, how do I get started? Some people have capital. Some people have money to invest. For other people, though, you might be living in your first rental property right now. And I wrote an article about that, which is in the material I'm leaving for you tonight. The fact that you might be living in your first rental property. You know, it might make a lot of sense to fix up your property a little bit cosmetically, spruce up the landscaping a little bit, maybe change out some light fixtures, things that don't cost a lot, so that you can have it reappraised, borrow some money against it while you're still an owner occupant, pull that cash out. There are no tax consequences to financing. You know, there's 2 ways to get money out of real estate. You can get money out of real estate by selling it, or you can get money out of real estate by borrowing it out. And there's no tax consequences to borrowing. But what I'm suggesting is you might fix up your property, refinance it, pull some cash out. That becomes your down payment for your next house. And you keep that property as your first rental property. You know, you don't have any vacancy while you're fixing it up. You don't have any vacancy while you're showing it, looking for a tenant. You probably have a tenant lined up, ready to move in about the time you move out. So there's not a gap there. There are a lot of things to think about. And I have clients that do that over and over again, especially younger folks. They'll move into a property and over a few years, they'll enhance the landscaping, maybe put some paneling in the powder room, do some things that fix up the value as the market increases the value, then refinance, pull some cash out, let that be the down payment for the next house and move on. It's similar to what you might see discussed if you look up investing in houses on the internet. There's a thing out there called the Burr Method. And one of the websites, Bigger Pockets, talks about this. BURRR stands for buy, upfit, refinance, rent, and repeat. And that's sort of what I was talking about. Buy something, maybe to live in yourself, or maybe you just buy it and fix it up. But increase the value with some sweat equity and some with smart decisions. Cosmetics can really add value to a property. Just upfitting, getting the lawn in good shape, fixing the landscaping, doesn't cost that much, can add a lot of value on a refinance. And then rent and repeat and keep doing it. And so that's a strategy. And we can talk about some other methods, but I think at that point, I'm gonna stop and let you guys have a chance to ask some questions. Jean, have we acquired some questions over time?
No, we don't have any questions in the chat, but this would be a great opportunity for people to enter their questions.
I haven't given people very much a chance to ask questions, but I will now.
Norman, do you want to stop sharing your screen?
I do. And I'm looking for the button to do that. Oh, right in front of my nose. There we go.
Okay.
All right.
Philip would like you to discuss the pros and cons of purchasing rental property in an LLC.
Okay. That comes up all the time, Philip. The good thing about owning your property, listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying purchasing it in an LLC. I'm saying owning it in an LLC. The good thing about owning it in an LLC is that if there were some type of lawsuit, the property would be at risk, but none of your other personal assets would be. Well, what kind of liability are we really talking about? I think the thing most people think about is, well, what if the tenant has somebody over, a family member or a guest, and they fall down the stairs and crack their head open and they're brain dead for the rest of their life. I guess that would be the very worst thing. If you're in an LLC, they can come after the assets of that LLC, but they can't come after your personal assets. Well, that's a positive, is the limitation of liability. The negative, though, is once you put a property in the name of a legal entity, be a corporation or an LLC, it's hard to finance or refinance. That's why I would say never acquire it into an LLC, because you can't get conventional financing. All of these 75, 80% loans that are available out there at great rates are available because those home loan lenders can sell those mortgages to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and in the secondary market. And once you have it titled in the name of an entity like an LLC, they can't do that. Therefore, they won't do the financing. You're sort of limited to go to a commercial bank to borrow money, and they're never going to give you a 30-year amortization schedule. And that's the secret to making the cash flow work, is you got to have a 30-year payment to keep the payments low enough to have that cash flow and some positive cash flow. So what do people do, Philip? And Gene, I'm going to walk very carefully over this. And if you want me to provide an article on it, I will. I've written one. Everybody that I know of and all the real estate attorneys that I work with say that this is exceptionally common. People do it all the time, but I'm going to come back in a minute and make a caveat. So hear what I'm saying. But what people do, including me, is we buy properties in our own name, and then after closing, we quit claim deed it to an LLC. There's an academic argument rolling around out there that says the lender could come after you and say that you violated the due on sale clause of your loan because you transferred the property. I don't believe that. I don't know that it's ever been litigated. It could be a possibility, but you're still personally liable on the debt. You're still making the payments every month. How do they know that you did that? And who the heck even owns the loan after it's sold? Because if you read Michael's book about the Big Short, you'll know these loans get carved up into tranches and bundled into packages of millions of dollars. I don't know what party's going to do the research to find out that, oh, he put this in an LLC. And if you are a single owner of the LLC, in other words, you're only one member, it's you don't even file a separate tax return. It's filed as part of your regular tax return. You don't even have a separate tax return. So hear me loud and clear. If you go ask a lawyer that doesn't specialize in real estate, they'll tell you, well, if you put it in an LLC, you might be violating the due on sale clause. The lender might come back and call that loan. The real estate attorneys that I've talked to, and I've asked dozens, say they've never seen it happen, don't think it would happen. Theoretically, it could happen, but they do it all the time. In fact, my attorney had me go in. I wanted to refinance a property I had in an LLC. He had me deed it back out to myself, refinance it in my own name, and put it back in my LLC. So if you'd like, I'll tell you what, I will send you, Gene, an article on that. It's got some disclaimers and caveats. You know, I can't tell somebody, I'm not giving legal advice. You need to talk to a real estate attorney. Where people get screwed up is they ask real estate questions of divorce lawyers or corporate lawyers who don't practice real estate law. But that's what happens literally all the time, is people buy it in their own name, deed it into an LLC, own it in an LLC. If you're really paranoid about liability, some people put each property in a separate LLC. I've never done that because every LLC you have, you got to pay the state of North Carolina a fee every year, file a report every year. And I carry that liability umbrella that if something were to happen, you know, I'm not going to be on my own. So I don't know if that's a good answer for you. It's probably more than you wanted to hear, Philip, but speak up. And you have a follow-up question, or did I answer your question? You can unmute yourself if you want to and speak up.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. We're looking at buying a property at the beach and doing it with another couple. So there would be more than just my wife and myself. And so there are follow-up questions, but if you would make that article available, and perhaps I can contact you directly with any specific questions.
Sure, you can do that, but obviously then it won't be a single member LLC. And I'll make one comment. I don't think we have time to talk about specific people's individual situations, but if you're going to own property with other people, either within your family or friends, be sure that you have a good written instrument that talks about how decisions will be made. What do you do when the parties disagree? Because I used to be partners with a builder that was a much older gentleman. He always insisted we put everything in writing. He said, let me tell you why, Norman. He said, as long as everything's going good and everybody loves each other, you don't need a thing in writing. But the day comes somebody's mad as can be, you got to have it written down. So in an LLC, you'd have a detailed operating agreement. In a partnership, you'd have a detailed partnership agreement. In common joint ownership, you'd have a real detailed memorandum of understanding. You don't want to lose a friendship over something like that. What other questions do we have, Jean?
Norman, I'm looking through, there are quite a few people asking about vacation properties.
Okay.
We also, someone wants to know about reviewing the umbrella insurance policy, EPOLIC, EPOLIC. I'm not sure if that's a specific policy or company.
Well, I mentioned the
those are
umbrella
two
policy.
good.
It's just a kind of insurance that not everybody knows about. Your homeowner's policy has liability insurance built into it. Your car insurance has liability built into it. If you own a business, you have liability built into it. An umbrella policy sits on top of your other insurance and picks up where they drop off and carries an extra $2 million worth of coverage, or $3 million or $5 million. They sell it, and it's just not expensive. So everybody ought to have one in this world that's so litigious. You could hit somebody and, they might call James Scott Farron. I shouldn't say things like that.
So the question I've seen several times is about beach properties or other vacation properties.
I'm not an expert on vacation rentals. That's what you're talking about. It's a little bit of a different animal, but I think it can be a fantastic investment. The rule of thumb that I'm familiar with, that I hear people talking about, is you want to buy in a good location where you can rent it for 12 to 16 weeks during the summer. And the way most of those models work with most of those realtors that manage rental properties is if you can rent it during those peak months, 12 to 16 weeks a year, that'll be enough income to carry it for the whole year. And then if you can rent it on the shoulder or the holiday seasons, that's where you make your profit. And of course, a lot of people do it because they want to be able to use that property when it's not rented. But I have to give you a caveat there because we're talking on the university's nickel. So we got to be straight up about what the laws are. Again, everybody does that. Everybody that owns those uses them when they're not rented. But what the law says, the tax law says, if it's truly an investment property and you're deducting all the expenses and depreciating it, you're really only supposed to use it 2 weeks a year for yourself. But again, how they know, and I'm not telling anybody to break a law or bend a rule or do anything illegal, but I will tell you that the tax law says you're only supposed to use it 2 weeks a year for yourself. But on the other hand, I'll tell you, everybody uses it whenever it's not rented. But they've said great appreciation at the beach. Now, one thing you should expect is to have a much higher management fee in that environment. I'm not sure what rates are, at every different place, but where here, if you hired a property manager to manage a single family home for you, you'd expect to pay 8 to 10% of the rent. I think on vacation rentals, it's more like 30 or maybe 40%. So it's much more involved because they're basically doing a new lease every week and turning the property every week. So it's a different animal. The other thing that I think people are being real successful with is the Airbnb type properties where they do host them themselves.
Another question I'm seeing is, should we wait on more inventory and will prices go down?
Well, nobody has a perfect crystal ball. I've done a lot of research and I'm very interested in it myself. The consensus of the people who are supposed to know is that prices are not going to go down, but the rate at which they're going up is going to slow down. For example, I read an article by an economist that I like, was saying in the past year here in the Triangle, we've seen about 12% appreciation in value. And in the next 12 months, they're saying 6% is what they're projecting. So it's not that prices are going to come down, but the pace at which they're going up is going to slow down. And if you think about it, it would be really hard for prices to come down because everything is based to some degree on new construction. Even in resale homes, you put a value on an older property based on what it would cost to replace that property. In new construction, workers aren't going to work for any less. Materials aren't going to get any cheaper. Land isn't getting any cheaper. I mean, I don't see any way that unless some new technology like printed houses, come about, unless there's some new technology, I don't see how housing prices are going to come down. But the question was, should they wait? I think that depends on how much you enjoy the game of negotiating. I mean, you got to know if you go out to try to buy something today, you're going to be in competition. You're going to be bidding against 4 or 5 other people. The cool thing would be if you know somebody that has an older family member that maybe is getting ready to move into assisted living, or you have a family member, and you could say, well, look, don't spend any money on a commission. Don't put it on the market. Let me buy it directly from you. And then it doesn't even go on the market. You don't get into that bidding war. So networking could be important, but yeah, I mean, there's no hiding about it. It's hard to find something to buy right now.
Right, next question is, how do you find a trustworthy property manager, real estate agent, or other members of your team?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad somebody asked that. Unfortunately, most of those kinds of relationships come about through referrals and come about through referrals that aren't researched. In other words, I go to work for a company and the boss's receptionist has been really, really nice to me in the interview process and onboarding, and I'm talking about moving, and the community says, oh, well, you need to use my sister. She's a realtor. Or you need to use my cousin Joe. He's the best realtor in town. Or you need to use so-and-so as a home inspector, or so-and-so as a lender. Don't go about it that way. I think the right way to do it is to interview just like you were hiring any professional. I wouldn't go and hire a lawyer without talking to 2 or 3 lawyers. I wouldn't go and hire a CPA without talking to 2 or 3. I want to find somebody that I relate to personality-wise, that's going to look me in the eye and say, yes, Norman, I have the time to give you the priority you deserve. How do you find those people? I think you have to connect with people who know people. For example, if I was trying to find a great realtor, I would go and talk to some lenders, and I would go and talk to some bankers, and I would go and maybe talk to an insurance person, because all of those people deal with realtors all the time. and vice versa. You know, I think if you have a realtor that you've connected with and you really like, you know, they've had experience. They know who's good and not good as a lender. And I tell you, you get a bad lender that can't really do what they say they're going to do, it becomes a nightmare really quick. It comes down to local knowledge. And if you know somebody in the community that's been there a long time that has that local knowledge, I would call them those kind of people. You know, another way to do it is to just, when you're given a name, research it, you know, Google it, look at their LinkedIn, look at their personal website. Do they have any designations? How long have they been in the business? What does the wording sound like? Do they seem like a competent person? But my point is, I would take time to do some research. I wouldn't just go with Sally's cousin's brother. And the reason is there's no barrier to entry. I mean, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of realtors out there, and a whole bunch of them aren't very good. They don't know a whole lot. You know, I hate to be ugly, but it's what I call a kitchen realtor. It's somebody that wants to drive a big car and deduct their automobile expenses and take their friends to lunch and write it off as a business expense. And they sell a house every once in a while, but they don't study the market. They don't know the details. You know, I have a lender that I routinely send people to when other lenders have failed. I mean, it's just, they're good people in every market. You just got to find them. That's about the best advice I can give you, Gene.
Good. How do you determine the right cost for a property and how to determine the right rent? The 1% rule.
Okay. When she or he says 1% rule, they're talking about one of these strategies for low-end properties that you'll see sometimes on the internet, and they're advocating that you shouldn't pay more than, you know, 100 times the rent. In other words, if it rents for $1,000 a month, you shouldn't pay more than 100,000. That doesn't work in any of the markets we've talked about. That's a dream. If you go to Detroit or you go to Houston or somewhere like that, you might can do that and buy distressed properties. It just doesn't happen like that. That's a urban legend in my way of thinking. Around here, if the rent was 2 or 3% of the purchase price, you'd be doing good. I mean, a $300,000 house is not going to rent for $3,000. It's just never going to happen. So I would caution you from buying into something like that. That's a strategy for very low end properties. What was the first part of the question, Jean?
How do you determine the right cost for a property?
Well, in commercial real estate, properties are valued with something called a cap rate. And that has to do with the after your operating expenses, what your cash flow is. But in residential real estate, what we're talking about, condos, townhomes, single family, you really have to look to the market, because investment buyers, even today, where they're at an all-time high, make up maybe 10% of the buyers. I mean, the majority of all the trades of real estate are between owner occupants. And that's all based on market value. So what you want to do if you look at a property is you then want to see what are the comps. What are similar properties that have sold recently in time in the same or similar neighborhoods? And a good realtor can pull those comps for you and show you what they are. That'd be one thing I'd ask a realtor before I hired them, to say, you know, are you really good on comp analysis? Can you provide me with a good breakdown if I find something I'm interested in, so that I don't overpay? But the way you want to set that value is by looking at recent sales of similar properties that have sold in the same neighborhood if possible, or similar, because neighborhoods themselves carry value.
how do you pay for the other properties without triggering lender penalties? My understanding was you could only prepay on your residence.
No, you can prepay on any 1 to 4. In the world of real estate, 1 to 4 family dwellings are all treated the same. So a duplex is the same as a single family house as a triplex. And you can own, without running up against any kind of rules, 10 or more. And you can prepay on any residential mortgage with no prepayment penalties. Commercial, that's not true. In commercial, there are prepayment penalties, but that's one of the things I like about residential.
We recently refinanced last year, but did not take any money out. How long do we have to wait to refinance to take advantage of the Burr method?
Okay, well, you can only refinance when you have equity because the bank's only going to loan a percentage of whatever the value of the property is. So if they refinanced, and let's say when that appraisal was done, there was a value on the property, let's say it was 6 months ago. Well, look at the value of the property and look at what you owe. If you've got 30 or 40% equity, you've got some more equity you could borrow out. You can do it tomorrow. I mean, you can do it in a week. There's no limit about how often you can do it. The problem is, do you have enough equity to do it? You know, as you hold property over time, what our model is I'm going to hold these properties over time. And during that time, the market's going to increase their value. That builds equity. And the tenant's money is paying the payments. That reduces the debt, which builds equity. But it's not like a 1-year deal usually. I mean, you know, it takes time. It's usually 5 or 6 years before you've built up enough equity to really make it worth doing. Although the way prices have been going up, it might be less today. I would, for that particular person, I'd look at the appraisal from the last time they refinanced and just see what their equity is. Go talk to their banker. So here's the appraisal was done 6 months ago. It's probably worth a little more than that now. And here's what we owe. What could we borrow if we refinanced again, or if we did a second mortgage? One warning about second mortgages, and this may be more information than people want to hear, but one type of second mortgage is called a HELOC, home equity line of credit. It's a line of credit. Be real careful, because in the tax bill that Trump put into play in 2018, came into effect, I think, 2019, interest on HELOCs is no longer deductible. So be really careful about that.
How can you require that a tenant place your name on the rental insurance? And do you have to pay part of the insurance?
You don't pay any of the insurance. It doesn't cost them any extra, and it's a requirement of your lease. You know, if you're going to rent the property through a company, they're going to have the ability for you to just say, you need to know I'm going to require tenant insurance, and I'm going to require that I be an additional named insured. Again, I'm not looking for business in any way whatsoever, but the company I own, we insist on it on every lease. We won't rent to you if you don't do it. And if you drop your insurance, we cancel your lease. It's all taken care of, written in the lease. That's another reason why you want to be an additional named insured, is if the tenant doesn't pay the insurance or drops it or cancels it, you get notified because you're an interested party. And so you could tell them, look, I got to be on it because I got to know that it stays in force. But it doesn't cost any extra for them, and you certainly aren't going to pay any of it. It's a condition of the lease.
Mm-hmm. This one is rather specific, but it may there may be parts of this that apply to other folks. My sisters and I own 1% of 3 rental houses, with our father owning 99%. When he passes away, what would be the best way for the 3 of us to own and rent the property? Should we form a management company and pay ourselves salary with the rents after expenses?
Well, I'm going to first of all say that your father is a very smart man, and I think I know what he's doing, although maybe not, but I think I do. he's being very, very wise. He set it up where you own 1% and he owns 99%. And I'll bet you at his death, in his will, he's leaving those properties to you. The reason he's doing that is because of a provision in the tax law that, again, not everybody knows about, but they ought to know about. It's called stepped up basis. When you own rental properties, you have to take depreciation, which is a great write-off every year that you own it. But as you take depreciation, it lowers your basis. The way you figure gain on the sale of a rental property is what you receive from the sale less your basis equals gain. So if he's owned those properties for a while, his basis has been going down while the value's been going up. There's a lot of gain inherent in those three houses. And if he sold them before he died, he would have to pay taxes on that gain. But there's a provision in our tax law that says if someone dies owning their property and they leave it to someone in their will, the person that receives it, it's hard to believe, but it's true, gets a step up in basis as of the date of death to 100% market value. And so those girls or boys, whoever the children mix is, after the father passes, which I hope is a long time in the future, but when it happens, on the date of death, they're going to get a step up in basis to 100% of market value, and they can sell it and pay no gain, no tax whatsoever on any gain. And I guarantee you that's what the dad's thinking about. I did the exactly same thing with my mom. I just wasn't that aggressive. I did 90-10. I wish I'd done 99-1. I think their dad's being really smart. It's called step up in basis at death, and everybody ought to know about it.
Okay. How do you manage debt to income ratio while building a portfolio? Do lenders start to treat the properties as investments instead of looking at your debt?
The answer to that question is it's going to vary from lender to lender. And that's why you need to talk to multiple lenders and not just pick the first one that comes along. Some lenders are going to say, we're going to count the debt as a debt obligation, but we're going to count the rent as income. So you have higher income, even though you have higher expense. Some people are going to say, we're not going to look at it that, some banks say, we're not going to look at it that way. It's an investment, it's flowing cash, and we're not going to count. But it's going to vary from lender to lender. So one of the things I always suggest to people is wherever you're doing your banking now, your checking account, your normal banking, go and talk to that institution because they already know you. You have a relationship with them. But then talk to a mortgage broker, not a specific mortgage banker of one person. It's like an independent insurance agent. If I go to State Farm, I'm only going to get quoted State Farm policies. But if I go to an independent insurance agent, he can shop 20 different companies for me. Same thing's true with a good mortgage broker. They can shop multiple sources. And so, again, you know, there are people in every market that specialize in financing rental properties. I mean, if it was Raleigh, I could tell them who to go see. And what you'd find is it's going to vary from lender to lender. But most of the time, it's not going to be a problem as long as you have some equity in the property and it's positive cash flow. It's interesting, the question of how much debt to take on, that's always a question. I mean, I'm very aggressive when I'm building my portfolio. I want to buy as many properties as quick as I can. So I'm leveraging the heck out of them. But, you know, people that have owned property for a long time tend to settle down and not be so aggressive and maybe keep things more around 70% finance and have about 30% equity always sitting there.
Myra has some questions. If you're living in your first home and you plan to rent it out, I don't see how you can refinance or get an additional loan for the next purchase unless you've already lived in the first home around 8 to 10 years. There's just not that much equity built up unless you're counting on inflation.
Well, if you look over the last 2 years, we've had about 20% increase in the last 2 years. So if it's local here, you've got some. I don't think it takes that long to build it. Now, I don't know where Myra is. I mean, there's some rural communities where prices have not gone up very fast, and that could be true. But the only way you're going to know is to have an appraisal done or have a realtor do a competitive market analysis, which is a realtor version of an appraisal, tell you what it's worth today. You know what it's worth. You know what you owe. You can tell whether you have any equity or not, and then have a conversation with your lender.
Okay, we've had a lot of questions here tonight, and I did want to take a moment to let you know what to expect next. We have recorded this event. We will be loading this to our YouTube channel, and you will receive an email most likely on Friday. It could possibly be on Monday with that recording. I will resend the documents that I sent out yesterday with that Zoom link reminder. And we will also send links to the documents that Norman has referenced tonight. So you're going to have actually a lot of reading material that you can go back and refer to after this event. I'm going to ask one more question for Norman, and that is, what's your favorite part of the triangle for rental investments? I think that's sort of a general question that a couple of people have asked in different ways.
All right. Well, let me say one thing in wrapping up before I answer that question, and then I absolutely will. There's a Harvard professor, his name is Pourvu, who teaches real estate at Harvard. And he's written a lot about portfolios and risk and real estate investing versus other types of investments. Pourvu says that everybody, including institutions, should have at least 20% of their assets invested in real estate. So that's one man's opinion. What I find interesting is that our university, the University of North Carolina, is one of the first academic institutions in America to seriously get into real estate as an investment. Metamont, for an example, I believe I'm correct that they were a joint venture partner in that development. The University of North Carolina has been an early and strong investor in real estate. So even our university has a portion of its assets put to work in real estate. Everybody should. It shouldn't be 100% of your investment portfolio, though. I would never say that. As far as the question about the triangle, right now, the hottest areas where there's the most rental demand would be in a crescent on the east side of the triangle from Morrisville down through Apex, the southern part of Cary, and probably on over as far as Holly Springs. That'd be your prime territory there. On the northern side of the east, it would be North Raleigh and then up through Nightdale and Wake Forest. A lot of rental demand there, but there's also good rental demand in Clayton, believe it or not. On the western side of the triangle, it's going to be primarily southern Durham, around the streets of South Point, that southern Durham part on over into Chapel Hill. And then there's an interesting thing happening now between Briar Chapel and Chatham Park, the new development that Dr. Goodnight's building in Pittsburgh. We've just recently taken on several new rental properties there, and they've rented like that for top dollar. I know in that development, they're only going to limit investor ownership to 10% of the whole community. And a lot of communities are starting to do that. But those would be the hottest areas, but there are lots of good areas. I mean, right now in Wake County, for example, Costco is building a huge new facility at the corner of 1010 Road. And I guess that's, not sure what that other major road is, but there's several new developments in there that have houses in the 300s, and it's Wake County schools. It's close to getting to downtown Raleigh. 540 is going to be very convenient. So there's demand everywhere, but the prime things are going to be your Chapel Hill, South Durham, your Morrisville, Apex, Southern Cary over to Holly Springs, and then North Raleigh up to Wake Forest and Nightdale. That would be my recommendation.
This has been a fabulous presentation. I know I learned a lot tonight. I've got a lot I need to go back and study to actually help me understand some vocabulary that I've heard bouncing around for years, but didn't really understand in the depth that you have explained tonight. I do see one more question, and that's how do you put aside for maintenance? Like, how do you know what percentage you should be saving for maintenance? And I think that's probably the last question we'll touch on, but that's valid for any rental property.
Yeah. Well, you know, every property is going to be different because of the age of the big items. The big items are going to be the roof, the heating and cooling, and then kitchen appliances really aren't that expensive anymore. So I would study the age of the roof, and I would know that at 25 years, I'm going to have to replace the roof. Heating and cooling systems, 14 years, you're lucky if you get that. Brand new systems don't last as long as older systems. And so as you're buying it, you're going to have an inspection done by a professional home inspector. And if he does his job right, he's going to tell you the ages of those things and where to expect some problems. So if he told me the roof has another 10 years to go, then I know I've got a budget for that new roof in 10 years. Or I've got a budget for that new HVAC in 4 years. And so I think it's based on the individual property. I have heard other people say, yeah, you need to plan on spending 1% a year back in your property. So a $300,000 house, that'd be $3,000 a year. Honestly, that hadn't been my personal experience. I haven't had to do that much.
Great. Well, thanks again, Norman. And before we close, I did want to once again thank our GAA members for helping make events like this possible. We do plan to continue our life skills series. We will be asking in a survey if you have any other ideas of things you'd like to learn about. And I would also like to let you know about some of the career programs that we have coming up in October. We're going to have a program where we're talk about how to evaluate your benefit package. And I think that's something we all need to study a little closer as we look at lots of folks are looking at new jobs right now. Either you're getting your first job or you're looking at making changes and you want to understand really what your offer includes. So I'm just putting a plug in there for one of our future programs. Thanks again, everyone. Norman, it was great to see you again, and everybody have a great evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Thank you, Norman.
Go Heels. Go Heels.